Yeah, we're live. 7:18. It's we'll call that 7-ish. It's be fine, right? We all know. We all know what the deal is. Tonight we're going to talk about the video that I just posted today, which is a 4.8 liter, the 4.8, 4.GREAT. I'm going to open this one up here. Try to open up one of the photos. Copy that. Put that here. Copy that. Here we go. Just so I can show you guys later on, what's up. Show you what is up. That's all good stuff. Troy, that's awesome. That's the photo where we are spraying the nitrous everywhere. So the video that I put up today was modifications on the 4.8 liter. Modifications we all love, we know, we're trying to make more power, and specifically on the 4.8. The interesting thing is that, I get this with any displacement motor. In fact, we get it with any delineation of motor. Really, we get it with. In fact, somebody just told me that all the Gen 4 motors are detuned compared to the Gen 3 motors. I'm like, I don't know that you can universally say that, but that's what I'm talking about. So the 4.8 liter is people want to segment that and go, yeah, well, you need this kind of cam for a 4.8, and you need this cylinder head for a 4.8 and this intake manifold for a 4.8, and you need all these things that are special for the 4.8. The reality is that the 4.8, we know it has a short stroke and it loves to rev. As long as you can get the valve train to cooperate, all those motors also love to rev. And that's really the key. So when we're talking about the range that we normally are talking about with, where guys want to rev the 4.8, we can rev like if we take a stock motor from the wrecking yard, we can rev the 5.3 every bit as far as a 4.8, because it's not the stroke that's changing that, or that's altering the RPM ability. It's not controlling that. It's not dictating that. The valve train is. So and the reason that people get this idea for the 4.8, at least anyway, is that when I show them, and I have done this many, many times, when I show them, hey, look, when we run a stock 4.8 with the same heads, cam, and intake manifold as a 5.3, the 4.8 makes power a little bit higher. That's because it loves to rev. No, that's because it's smaller displacement. So therefore, the camshaft is a little bit wilder. The intake manifold wants to run a little bit higher RPM. The cylinder heads flow a little bit more relative to the displacement. All of that stuff just tends to push power up a little bit higher. It's not the short stroke, it's the lack of displacement basically that's doing that. If we were to take bore size out of it, just like we took stroke size out of it and made it a 4.8 with a smaller bore, the same thing would happen. It would still make power at a higher engine speed. And please, I want everybody to comment on that and tell me, oh, Richard, no, it's, the bore thing and the bore versus stroke. Now we can get into rod ratio. We can talk about all those things. It's displacement. Just like in this case, it's not a short stroke motor being able to rev. It's valve train. It's not the stroke length that's dictating that. If you want to run lots of RPM, the very first thing that you have to cure is valve train. If you want it to make power when it revs also, you have to put the right camshaft in it. And you have to put the right one and combine that with the other things in the valve train, specifically the valve springs. They have to be able to allow this motor to rev working with that specific cam profile. So it has to be stable. It has to have enough of the things that it needs to make power at that RPM if you want to make power at that RPM. And that actually would be different for a 4.8 than it would be for like a 5.3 or a 6.0, assuming that you wanted them to make power at the same engine speed. Camshaft had to be bigger on the bigger motors because they're bigger motors and they would need more camshaft to be able to do that. You also have to have all the other things to make it at least want to make power up there. So just because it has a short stroke doesn't mean that you're going to make it an 8,000 RPM with a stock factory long runner truck intake manifold or with stock heads. If you have other things to match the camshaft, life will be much easier. But we're talking about the stock 4.8 and we're talking about stock and mildly modified 4.8s because the one thing that everybody would want, I think all the 4.8 guys and gals can universally agree on, and at least if they're performance people, is that the one thing that the 4.8 needs even more than the other bigger motors, you could argue, is that it needs more power. So if you ever compare a 4.8 to a 6.0, you're like, oh yeah, or drive them in the same vehicle, you're like, oh yeah, the 6.0 is definitely way better. But that doesn't mean we can't make a 4.8 better. But there's a lot of incentive to do that because it's starting as the low man on the totem pole. It has the least amount of low speed power because it's small. It has the least amount of mid range and top end power because it's small. The only thing you say about it is that it loves to rev. But what I wanted to show in this video is a couple of things. And I threw sometimes I'm doing a video and the one thing that we're going to talk about is enough to there's enough I can cover that in the amount of time that would be, that would make a reasonable video. But on this one, what I wanted to do is put a bunch of things in there. So I wanted to cover, hey, we have a 4.8. Let's try to make power with it. And the easy way to do that with any LS, obviously camshaft is number one, put some kind of camshaft in it. Now you could pick any kind of camshaft that you want. But on a 4.8, what you want to do is not go, and especially if it's something you're going to drive, you don't want to go overboard in camshaft. Trust me when I'm saying, if you're watching this video, that there are way more people that have been disappointed with over camming the motor compared to people who are disappointed by under camming the motor. That's a handful of people. There's lots of people who have put way too big of a camshaft in it and had it being, had the combination be soft down low. And when you step on the gas, that's where you want to feel it. And if the thing, it's nice if it revs up and makes power on the big end, and that feels all good. But where you want it to feel good, which is why particularly American drivers like big motors, because when you nail the throttle, you want the torque and you want it to take off. Having a big cam in there, especially on a small motor, not ideal combination there. And so it will feel soft. It's not going to turn the tire. You got to put a lot of converter in it. You got to do other things to make it all work. And you can, but like I said, way more people, big cam, disappointed. I would much rather have a smaller camshaft in this thing and rather have the thing be snappy and go, which, like I said, gearing and converter can kind of make it feel that way. And then you could get it into the power band where you're actually making power. Or you could also make the motor bigger. So with that in mind, in this video, what I wanted to do on the 4.8 is put some kind of reasonable camshaft in it. And then we just hit the easy button. Whenever you add nitrous to anything, and a lot of guys don't seem to get this, especially that message is actually fairly easy to convey to people who are just starting out and their mind hasn't been spoiled yet with you have to have a nitrous cam, or you have to have nitrous heads, or you have to have nitrous exhaust valve, whatever, valve angles or valve jobs or whatever all the things are that people want to attribute this, that they're talking about, or somebody read about, or somebody saw a video or a TED Talk where they talked about in the absolute highest level of racing that they did this thing that now everybody seems to think that they need. Here's the reality. Just like with, if we make the motor bigger, it makes more power. It's simple. People want to get into whether you do it with a bore or a stroke or what combination you use it with. The reality is the displacement is a big thing. How you adjust it with those other two things is a small thing. Nitrous is the same way. If you add the jetting so that you add 100 horsepower shot of nitrous, it's going to add 100 horsepower. It's going to do that regardless of what your starting point is. It will add 100 horsepower to a stock motor. It'll add 100 horsepower to a cammed motor. It'll add 100 horsepower to a modified motor, because what you're adding is not based on the thing that you're adding it to. You're adding some sort of fixed amount based on the flow that you're providing because of the pressure and the jetting. And, you can mess that up with a bad tune, but it's going to work like that. So a lot of guys don't have they think that, oh, well, what cam should I use with this? Well, you should, we talk about this when we talk about turbo stuff too. You should pick the camshaft not based on the fact that it's a turbo. You should pick the camshaft based on the other things that you want it to do. Same thing with nitrous. If you have a motor that you're driving around and you're not on nitrous all the time, because I guarantee you won't be using a nitrous all the time at idle and part throttle while you're cruising down the road while you're doing 90% of your driving, the camshaft is going to be the camshaft choice that you pick for this combination is going to be more important for that than it is for your nitrous. So pick the camshaft that's going to work for your combination of vehicle weight and gearing and usage and idle quality and converter size and all that stuff. And then you just add nitrous to that. So if you want a camshaft, you want a combination that makes good power, like this 265 cam that we added in the video, that has a good power gain, doesn't really lose a bunch down low, can be probably that 212 cam on a 4.8. It's probably going to need a converter, but not a real high stall speed converter. And that's the other thing to think about on 4.8 is, even though this was a 212 218 cam, that's still reasonably sized for a 4.8. You might think about going with a smaller one for a 4.8. You can see we got almost a 50 horsepower gain from what is essentially like a stage 2 truck cam. So on a 4.8, these cams become relatively bigger. So bear that in mind when you're choosing that. But whatever happens with your camshaft, when you're adding your camshaft to your 4.8 or whatever modification you make, then you add nitrous to that. You're just adding, if you add 100 shot, you're just adding 100 to that. You're stacking 100 on top of wherever you ended up with your other modifications. In this case, we added a 125 shot on, I think a 54 jet. The thing that you can do with these different jetting sizes, and a 100 horsepower shot isn't technically 100 horsepower, and 125 shot isn't 125 shot. It depends on a lot of things. Most notably, it depends on what you run your bottle pressure at, because the flow rate through your jetting, your 125 shot or your 100 shot, the flow rate through that can change dramatically and make it not a 100 shot or a 125 shot. It could make it a 150 shot, or it could make it a 75 shot. If your bottle is near empty and you have no pressure and it's not flowing a bunch of nitrous, it's not going to make a lot of power. If you have a full bottle and you have the thing jacked up and really hot, it's going to flow even more. It's going to make even more power. A lot of times we get guys that will attribute that to, I ran this cam and we ran this deal and we ran this jetting and it made this power. That's great, but you didn't run it at 900 psi. You ran it at 11 or 1200 psi, and that's not magic. Has nothing to do with a magic cam. That has everything to do with the fact that you had lots more nitrous flow. That's why you made the extra power. But then they'll be, especially if they're selling camshafts, they will quickly attribute it to that. Or if they're a tuner, they'll attribute it to their tune. Or if they're a nitrous supplier, they're going to attribute that to their cool nozzle design or whatever. But the reality is, it's just, more often than not, it's just nitrous flow. So, but we did run this on this 4.8. We ran a 4.8. This thing came from the wrecking yard. This one had the JE piston in it pistons that we had run in it a lot, and it did, it did okay. It did basically the same as a lot of the other stock ones. The stock flat top pistons that I've run many times, because I've run 5 or 6 of these, I think. And then so we ran it stock with the stock heads and cam and intake manifold and that stuff. And then we put the little 265 cam in it, and then we ran nitrous on it. But then after that, to add more coolness to the video, what I did was we ended up also doing, while we had it on the dyno, because, if you do all of your prep ahead of time and you have everything ready to go, you can get lots done. So we also ran intake manifolds. So I ran 2 Edelbrock manifolds, a single plane and a dual plane. They're RPM dual plane, and then the Victor Jr. single plane. And we jetted it, and so that we could dial the thing in and make good power. And it just goes to show you that, and particularly in, like we had talked about with overcamming it, on the intake manifold side, picking a single plane intake manifold for a 4.8, especially one where you're making power below 6,500 RPM and below, because of your cam choice, the single plane intake manifold is a terrible idea for a 4.8. I get lots of guys asking, well, what if you would have used a smaller carburetor, or if you would have put more timing in, or look, what I'm testing here is the design difference between the 2 intake manifolds. The dual plane actually did very well. And if you saw in the video, I compared the dual plane to the truck manifold. Now, the truck manifold made more power, a good chunk of more power, through the meaty part of the curve. But the dual plane actually made more low speed power than the truck did. And not surprisingly, the dual plane made more low speed power, a lot more than the single plane did. In fact, it made more power than the single plane basically all the way to the top. They made the same peak power, but the single plane was just down everywhere, and down at like 3,000 in the 3,500 range. It was down a lot, 40 or 50 foot-pounds. So it was terrible. It's not a good choice. So that thing would be really, really soft. with that cam, and it's a small cam. That cam and a single plane on a 4.8, especially if you put it in some kind of heavier vehicle, a Chevelle or a truck or something, it'd not be a fun combination. You'd want to hit the nitros at like 1800. I don't recommend doing that. So it's very important. Pick the intake manifold correctly on a 4.8, even more problematic. The things that you'd want to do on the 4.8, obviously compression. Don't go really big on the cylinder head. You don't need that. Intake manifolds, the 4.8 will respond to intake manifolds in this RPM range. A fast is definitely better. We've run bigger cams, we run ported heads. But again, you're talking about it being a 7,000 RPM plus motor. And that's where it's going to want to make power. And it's not going to make power down at, off idle to 2,000 RPM like some of the guys want. So let's see what you guys are doing. We got to start a poll. Very simple. 19 characters. Who has run a 4.8 liter? Let's see kind of where this group is on the 4.8 liter and see, it tells us a little bit whether you're LS and whether you're small LS. I can't stop, no stop, but you're no brake. So, watching the high boost 12 valve vids to get me jazzed up about the diesel build from Winnebago. That's good. So I'll show you the, I'll be able to show you. This is Troy. Sometimes we have fun while we're doing this testing. So the motor was on the engine dyno, and then we were running the nitrous on it. We just had a little, I think that was a rubber hose, just a connector that we use to put stuff, when we're blowing through the throttle bodies. But we just drilled a little hole in that. I think we put and also drilled it through the hose clamp to make it stable, and then put the nitrous fogger nozzle in there. And so he's showing you how all that works. Troy is super cool. Troy's the go-to guy at West Tech. He's awesome. East Coast is in the house, Mr. Internal Combustion Guru. Want to buy a 440? Do you have a 440? The Third Coast, do you dyno stuff anymore? Or is it just this? Just what? Did you see the video that I put up today? Or are you just here to complain? People in their comments are amazing. I read through the comments and I'm like, it's like you didn't even watch the video. It almost seems like that. I've been watching political stuff on Netflix, not political stuff like that kind of political stuff. The Diplomat and Madam Secretary. We just kind of started watching that stuff, and it's interesting. But it's interesting that people come in, and I see this in the comments too. They just come in with a preconceived notion of something that they already want to argue about, and so they just make a statement and then start arguing off of that. Not about the topic or about the reality of what the video is about or the results or any of that. Just, you should have done this, or you didn't do this, or what, somebody wants to, I don't know, maybe they had a bad day or something. Richard, did you find 262AH or 270? I haven't been, I have to be down at West Tech to find that out. Let's see. Todd's in the house. Madberg, 60 pounds would make a lot more than 1,000 horsepower. 60 pounds of boost, I don't think would make 1,000 horsepower on the Sprint motor, though. Doesn't make very much horsepower per pound of boost. Butch, you're building a 496 with the BR300. What is the suggested spring for the solid roller cam? Comp probably has a spring rate, or has a spring that they recommend for that in the catalog. The springs that we've used are probably, I'm thinking that they're going to be 180 to 200 on the seat, and then more than 400 open. Sure thing. Let's see. Julius, what's up? I could say we're going the 274 or the 268 or 262. I would. Did you take a look at the video that I did on all of those cams, Admiral? You get like most of the gains that you're going to get out of the 262 compared to the stock cam, and then the other ones I don't think are enough of a gain compared to the trade-off. Racer, you want to see a 102 lobe separation angle on something? Maybe I didn't see a previous statement. You should give a TED talk. I don't know. I don't know TED very well. Mid-20s. Uh-oh. All of these kids are. Do you want them to get off your lawn too? All these kids around here want to put the biggest cam in their big trucks and expect it to still drive good. Yeah, truck would be the last place that I'd put the big cam in, unless you got lots of gear and lots of converter in it. I own an 0348 Silverado. Love it. 100,000, 190,000 miles, still running strong. I kind of wish I had a 48 in mine. I would wish it was two-wheel drive. So obviously somebody wants to not be here anymore. And it's as simple as that. I'm starting back my 351 Windsor build. It's running again. Needs timing chain. Might as well do the cam. Small cam. AFR 165s. All that'll work good. Most everyone that's into hot rods have a stall converter. Yeah, I would think that they would not run. I mean, there are guys that have newer trucks like my Silverado that would want to put a cam in it, that would want to keep the stock converter, I think. But I think converters, I'm surprised that, and maybe guys are doing this, but I'm surprised that BTR or Texas Speed or those guys don't have cam and converter packages already, because that would seem to be a good seller. Shouldn't your 3-liter turbo diesel Mercedes get good fuel mileage? My buddy's kid put a BTR Stage 3 cam in a stock Suburban. Yeah. And we see that with the turbo stuff too, because that's the problem, is that you mash the gas and then there's no low speed power. There's no boost because there's no low speed power. And so it's just not a good combination. Over camming is very similar to oversized turbos. Julius, I'd happily trade a Barra for a 4.8 or a 5.3. Yeah, you guys don't have any of those. Did they just had LS1s, right? I wouldn't waste money on a 4.8. 4.8s are good motors. I was tricked into getting my first one, but it worked out really well for a hot rod in the history of the LS community, I think. Always great pictures of Troy. Yeah, Troy's awesome. I put a lot into my 6-liter LS2. Those work good too. Let's see. Like a trade 3 5.3s for a Boss 260-290 intake. Yeah, that would be good. Oh, here we go. I scrolled by something, so I'm coming back to it. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. The question seems to be, is it worth the work to do an LS swap in a small block Ford vehicle versus spending the money on Ford parts? That you got to answer that. If you went with a big cam, do you think a single plane would be more properly matched, or do you think the engine itself is just too small to utilize it? I don't know. Judging by what we got from the single plane and dual plane test on this one, I don't know where the crossover is going to come. There was no crossover up to 6,500 RPM. So we know it's going to come beyond that if we put more camshaft in it. I don't know that let's say the single plane is better from, let's say it's 6,500 to 7,000. It won't be on a 4.8. It's going to be way beyond that. So where would you have to rev it to make the single plane work? Are you talking about an 8,500 or 9,000 RPM motor to where, and that's just not realistic. I don't think a Victor Jr. on a 4.8 is ever going to be a choice over the dual plane. Five threes are less expensive in New Hampshire, from what I've seen. A 5.3 is less expensive than a 4.8. I don't know how they would even know the difference between those motors. Tim, I have more trolls than usual. And he's been here before too, and I don't know what his deal is. I don't understand. Yeah, Jim is gone. He's not here anymore. Have you watched the House of Cards? I haven't watched House of Cards. I had somebody else recommend that though. Nick, do you think having a short stroke like a 4.8 is less likely to break with a root style blower as opposed to a 4-inch stroke? No, I don't think that that's the case. LS truck engines are plentiful in Louisiana and fairly cheap. Kevin Spacey, I know who he is, and I like I said, people have recommended House of Cards. I have a question about head bolts for a 4.8. What is your question? Just ask the question. I'm not a big cam guy anymore. 2011 Express with a 4.8, 300,000 miles on it. That's good. My 5.3 has over 300,000. They run a long time. Torque cam and a ported stock manifold. A torque cam is a good choice for a 4.8. Julius, are they still making like replacement parts for those, for the Holdens and stuff, and the Fords? Tim, I'm assuming that's moderate. I moderate for a channel with 210,000. Richard, all live streams. You'd be amazed what or who is out there. People, yeah. I think the 270 is worth a bit of trade off against the 260 to get more peak. Okay. Is yours still a 4.6? You ever been to cruising the coast down here at the Mississippi coast? I haven't. I put a 3,000 stall before the big cam. That's what likely killed my transmission in 2 weeks. Was it a 4L60 Utah? Yeah, cam and converter package. Somebody has to be doing that. I mean, that can't really be a new thing, right? Let's see. I think that I've learned more from your videos than anywhere else. That's good. But riflemen, that's why you go to places to learn stuff. That's why I come here. That's why I do all the things that I do, is to learn. I don't obviously I don't know everything, and nobody here does, and nobody in the world does. So going out and learning more stuff, that's always good. Comp recommended a 929 or 926 for my 235 cam. And shim to 150, close 480 open. Is that on a is that for an LS? 480 open seems like a lot. Is it, unless that's a solid roller cam or something? I don't want to take from tonight. There's no topic, Dino. You in the once we're doing the Q&A, you could ask whatever question you want. I don't want to take from tonight's, but can we talk Jeep LS swaps sometime in the future? Our needs are different than street strip guys. What are your needs? No, we can talk about it tonight. If you're looking for low speed torque, which everybody is, I'm sure, with a Jeep, then you want to go with all the things that add low speed torque. A camshaft is not one of those things. You want to have, if you're going to put a camshaft in, it's going to have to be very small, because otherwise it's not going to make like crawling Jeep power. And I don't know what RPM you're at when you're crawling, because I've never watched that. Like, I've never seen any data logging on that. But if you want more torque, you need to do it with displacement, compression, runner length, displacement, boost helps too, positive displacement blower stuff. I would love to stroke a 5.3 as their exercise in learning engine building. You can. 4-inch stroke cranks are very, very common for those. I saw you on YouTube a few minutes ago. What's that? Am I famous? I have an 04 Silverado with a 4.8. Trying to get head bolts. When I do my head gaskets, trunnion upgrades, lifter springs, push rods, there's 2 different head bolt patterns. There's not 2 different head bolt patterns. There's 2 different head bolts for a Gen 3 and a Gen 4 motor. When you take your head bolts out, take a look and see, are they are some of them long and some of them short? I'm not talking about the little ones that are up at the top. On the Gen 4 stuff, they're all the same length. On the Gen 3 stuff, you have different length ones. Some of them are really long and some of them are shorter. So you just get Gen 3 or, oh no, wait. 2 different, oh no, head bolts. That's right. We're talking about head bolts. Okay. I was going back to push rods. I'm like, wait, I'm explaining completely the wrong thing. So head bolts, Gen 3 or Gen 4. That's all that there are. Richard, I still think the Aviator intake is a better intake for the 464 valve than any of the other options if it gets ported out. I disagree with that, but you can pick the one that you want. How would I figure out what style I have without taking anything off? 04. I think 04 is still a Gen 3. Does anybody want to chime in there? Richard, when rebuilding these junkyard motors, do you go as far as resizing rods? No, we don't do any of that. When I take them apart, I don't normally rebuild them. When I take them apart, what we do is, like if we put ring gap in them, all of the stuff just gets reused. All the bearings, the rings, all that stuff gets reused. I don't resize the rods. I don't do any of that. Other than testing hundreds of LSs, Richard, do you have you run one in your view of a particular setup? I don't know what you're asking there. Are you asking about the Jeep thing? Is that what you're talking about? Is this the Jeep guy? I'm trying to scroll back and see. If you are the Jeep guy, I've never owned a Jeep, let alone an LS Jeep. I was just commenting on how you make more torque, which I would think that you would want Jeep stuff. But no, that's Dino though. That's not right. So hodgepodge, tell me what you're asking there. I use your words. Is 2-inch into 2.5-inch exhaust? What is the 2-inch part of it? How much 2-inch exhaust do you have? And it's not going to hurt it that much, as long as it's not a 2-inch single exhaust. Currently LS swapping a Cherokee XJ. I was wondering how the truck Norris with no spring cams will work in a 4.8. It would definitely require a converter. I don't know what transmission you have in there. It's definitely going to require a converter, and it's going to be a little soft down low. I'm cramped for space. How would you don't want to use how would an LS1 or LS6 intake manifold affect the 4.8? An LS6 manifold is a good choice for a 4.8. It works fine. Mid 300s at the flywheel or mid 300s at the wheel? There's lots of 4.8s. There's some 4.8s that made coming up near 500 flywheel horsepower. So you can take a look at those with heads and intake manifold and bigger cams. Had a 4.8 in an old Silverado. Blew my budget on a 6-liter swap. A turbo on the 4.8 is also another good way to go if you want to make more torque. They run the VIN and tag the engine. Yeah, you could do that. I think the 4.8 gets a bad rap because it takes more horsepower, torque numbers, has a bigger cubic inches. I don't have a preferred 4.8 setup. If you know, have you been to this channel before? If you've been to this channel, you know that I test lots and lots of stuff so that everybody else can pick the things that they want. I don't sell combinations or do anything like that, so I don't really have one. So scrolling back, trying to there's a lot of comments here. Let's see. With bigger cubes, will the power peak come in at a lower RPM, all things being equal? Yes. If you take a look at the video that I did on the 4.8, 5.3, 6.0, and 6.2, if you run the same things on all of them, the peak power comes in earlier on the bigger motor. Has anyone else swapped a Cherokee XJ? David wants to know. Still hard to beat a sloppy stage 2 in a 5.3. Torque and Beans, what vehicle do you have a sloppy stage 2 5.3 and that gets 26 miles to gallon? Most learniest live. I like that. Points for that. Let's bring back the tubular GT40 intake. I have one of those. GT40, iron and aluminum heads, B, all the letter cams. It doesn't matter. The chat is fine. And I've run all of that stuff, and I have a 5-liter Mustang. A sleeper Astrovan, that's good. Is there a longer intake manifold for 4.8 than LSXR? An LSXR is not probably not as long as the factory truck manifold. So the only one that makes more torque is the dual throttle body cross ram that Holley sells for the Cathedral port. That one has pretty good low speed power. It's problematic because it's a dual throttle body though. Any updates on the PTR manifold? I don't have it, and so I haven't done any testing. But as soon as I test it, people will know because obviously I'll be talking about it. Mint lightning blowers go for big money too. 04 is a Gen 3. Gen 3 is a 24. Gen 4 is a 58. A Gen 4 is also going to be the Gen 4 blocks are not going to have the rear cam sensor either, right? No brakes is a Jeep guy. Some Gen 3s have Gen 4 rods. Yeah, we've seen the Gen 3.5 stuff. What's a good cam for a 4.8 daily driver? I don't know how much street and strip you're doing. A daily 4.8 good cam would be a torque cam. But if you want something that makes more power and you're willing to do a converter or something, then you're looking into the Truck Norris stuff. Caleb, there are no stupid questions. And all the small block Ford engines. Have you ever used low tension, low friction rings? I don't think I have. I know that we've used some stuff from Total Seal, but I don't remember using a low friction ring or a low tension ring. I'd have to go back and look. Maybe on the Engine Masters motor. Yeah, the ring tension can definitely improve fuel mileage. With bigger cubes, will the power peak come at a lower engine speed with a single plane, all other things being equal? So see, you're trying to get at something. So just ask the end question. You're taking steps towards something that you want to know. So what is the thing that you want to know? I already answered your question. It doesn't matter what intake manifold's on there. If you run the same intake manifold on a bigger motor than a smaller motor, the bigger motor will, if all the other things are the same, the bigger motor will make power at a lower engine speed. Does a truck engine pan fit a second gen Camaro? Does anybody know? I don't think so, but I'm not sure. I don't do a lot of swap stuff. Sorry, hit send by accident. Do you or have you built an LS for a personal car truck in your vision? I don't know. Even would you like to hear what your thought process for your setup? You mean have I wanted to build an engine and then built that to put in some kind of car that I wanted to race or something like that? I've never built an LS for that because the LS that I have in my truck is all stock, so that one works just fine. I've built other engines for other things. They were not LS motors like for Bonneville and stuff, but those were other mostly import stuff. In fact, they were all import stuff. The Honda several times, the Suzuki, the Volkswagen, my Chevy Sprint. None of those were LS motors though. And then now the Dodge Omni. Forgot the single plane on the, yeah, just whatever the intake manifold. I mean, it doesn't matter what the intake manifold is. A bigger motor makes power at a lower engine speed if the cam and all that stuff are the same. Let's see here. Here we go. Yeah, some of the stuff had Gen 4 rods, like I think the L33 probably has Gen 4 rods, right? Let's see. No 4.6 stuff. They're big when it comes to crawling. Everything depends on how you want to use it. Transmission type, transfer case, axle gearing, tire size. Is an off-road only or street and trail. The Soggy Bottom cam. Is that made by the Soggy Bottom boys? Crazy flat torque curve with the Kenny Bell. Is it worth swapping a 4.8 for a 5.3? If I had a 4.8 in a truck and I wanted to do more heavy duty towing with it, I would be inclined to put a 5.3 in it. That would be better than any other modification you could make on the 4.8 for towing, unless you were going to put boost on it, probably. But if you were going to do that, you should put a 6-liter in it or a turbo. Really enjoyed my 5.3 with a 231, 238 Lanati cam. L6 intake. Yeah, the L6 intake manifold is a good manifold. It was the go-to manifold for a long time before the fast stuff came out. 350 horsepower at the crank is really easy to do. That is in stock 4.8 range and 5.3 range. Sandy 5.3 flat top, 216, 220, 20 inches of 2-inch into a 2.5-inch Y. So you have 2s coming out of the exhaust manifold. I don't know. Maybe it's 10. It's easy to test. You know, you could go have a muffler shop build you 2.5 or 3-inch, just like sections of tubing that are this long, and just run it open exhaust on a chassis dyno. And you can see whether or not you need to spend money on an exhaust. Would you trust a 4L65 behind a 4.8 that's 400 horsepower? 400 flywheel horsepower? Maybe. But how high are you revving it and stuff? That's the thing. Is there any advantage of the 4.8 over the 5.3? No. I mean, the 5.3 will do it anything that the 4.8 would do. It just does more of it because it has more torque. But and 4.8s aren't more common than 5.3s either. I think at least we see more 5.3s in the wrecking yard than we see 4.8s. But there's lots of both of them. Total seal gapless for the wing for the win. They sure love boost. I've never run gapless rings on a turbo deal. Richard, why don't you like the aviator intake? I didn't say I didn't like it. I just said it isn't the. I don't think it's the best 4-valve manifold out there. The 4.8 likes to rev more. Yeah, they do. Man of constant sorrow. That's right. I love the fact that the movie was what is it? Ulysses? Is that what it is? Some yeah, it was the because it had the one-eyed giant and stuff. Yeah, it was. It was Ulysses, I think. They had the sirens, and they had let's see. See anybody that makes a single overhead cam head for a big block Ford? I don't know about that. I think my downshifts. I think that what killed my 4L60 was when I was towing the Omni, going up the hills outside of Salt Lake City, going up those grades. I had to go down into second gear, and I think dropping down into second gear, and I think that's probably what hurt. Is the fast intake the best for the LS? It is for 7,000 RPM and below on a cathedral port deal. I don't think Medusa would have been one of the villains, but that's not the the Iliad is the book that I was thinking of by Homer. That's what the story is. That's what the Soggy Bottom Boys, that movie with George Clooney and stuff. That an interesting test of stock cam truck intake 5.3 twin GT25s for instant low RPM torque and spool for Jeep guys. Yeah, I'm actually not a fan of having lots of torque at 2,000 RPM. I think it tends to break the motors, but it definitely could be there. For my Jeep, starting with an L33, but learning the 862 heads are better than the 799s at my desired low RPM range due to flow velocity. Using truck intake, what cam should I be looking at? What RPM range do you run for what you're doing? Yeah, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Hillbilly Iliad, that's right. Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Yeah, that was the name of it. So, Julius, you want to modify Coyote or modular heads to fit at Cleveland? How much gains have you seen comparing a stock tune versus an optimized tune on an LS or an 8.1? That's actually a really good question. The problem is I can't answer it because I never run any of these motors with a stock tune. I don't have access that I know of to a stock tune. I'd have to data log it and see what maybe what it runs in the vehicle, because I don't ever do that. I'm thinking that tunes are probably 15 horsepower or something like that on chassis dynos. Every one of the combinations that I run on the engine dyno already has an optimized tune. And I don't know, on the 8.1, it probably would be even more, especially down low, because I know that they torque manage the heck out of those motors. They really throttle those things back to try to save the transmissions on those big torque motors. Richard, excuse me, you should test anti-reversion steps down on the exhaust. Are there performance cams that work with DoD? I don't know if Brian has those or not. HU, we look at the VIN number to tell if it's a 4.8 or 5.3. You can take one of the spark plugs out and look and see if it has a flat top piston. That's usually a pretty good tell. Off idle to 3,500, mostly for rock crawling. Yeah, so you're going to need displacement and compression, and there isn't an intake manifold that's long enough to be working down there. Ever tested the gains by adding an LSA supercharger? No, we've added lots of superchargers to different things, but not specifically the LSA. Even allowed throttle percentage at low RPM are limited on stock. Yeah, with drive-by-wire stuff, they can use that as one of the countermeasures is throttle angle and timing. And if it's a variable cam, that also. Richard, have you had a nitrous backfire ruin an intake? I haven't. Well, I take that back. I have. when we did the Big Bang motor, I ruined the whole motor, including the intake manifold. I have blown an air box off of a 5-liter at the drag strip with the nitrous backfire. Hot rod made 430 horsepower with a 4.8 LS. The story that you're talking about, it might be one that I did, and you can make a lot more than that with a 4.8. You can make 500 with a 4.8. It's just, it's going to be at 7,000 RPM or more. Yeah, you could make 430 horsepower with a 318 Mopar. Some 5.3s had flat tops. They did. But I think that all the 5.3s that had flat tops are going to be aluminum. Right? Am I right in that? The L33 did come with flat tops. It came with flat tops and 799s. Two more minutes. I'm going to get rid of my poll. Wow, it's come down a lot. Who has run a 4.8? Most of them saying no. 68% saying no. So only 32% yeses. Somebody needs to put too bad the spacing is just silly on modular motors, but otherwise you could. What's the? Well, no, the spacing's got to be too small if they put the LS and Cleveland motors on the inline 6-cylinder Ford. Too bad you couldn't put Coyote heads on that. I'm in the 32%. I am too. I run lots of 4.8s. Any single turbo kits you recommend for the 4.8? I just don't. I've never tested real kits, so I don't normally do that. The only kits I can remember testing, I've tested a kit, a Coyote kit from Hellion, and I've tested a few of the kits from HP Performance back in the day, the 5-liter Ford, and then I think a Hemi one. I think we did, and then we did an LS one also. I think a single LS one. Dino, so the stock one's 195 and you're at 235. A V8 is definitely going to be more than that. And if you put an aluminum one in there, then it would be lightweight too. There's lots of cheap manifolds for turbo stuff. They're not very common, but there are some iron block 5.3s with flat tops. What iron block 5.3 came with a flat top? You've never seen an LS in person? Do you not go to the wrecking yards? It's a good cam for high mileage everyday 4.8. If the BTR torque cam is a really good one. I would like to put, it'd be nice to put another motor in my truck, although it still runs good. The L33 would be good. Or in the Z. Your head bolts are the early head bolts. They're Gen 3. Kyle, are you actually going to do that? Run a carbureted twin screw on top of a Holley high ram? The twin screw is going to discharge in one spot, on away from one end or the other of the blower, and so it's going to favor, unless you have an intercooler between those, which can help as a diffuser. It's probably going to favor 4 of the runners, I would think, on a high ram. Haven't been in a wrecking yard in 15 years. The LQ4 does have flat top pistons. That's not a 5.3 though. That's a 6.0. Wrecking yards are nearly all gone. Oh, in Australia they are? Luckily, we still have junkyards for me to go roam around in. And, I can go and dream. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will be back tomorrow. I'm trying to think of I don't even know what video I'm doing. I have to figure that out tonight for tomorrow. But I will be doing another video tomorrow. And we will have another live stream. So I will see you guys all tomorrow night. Bam, 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 bam.